Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, hope you're doing well, hope you're all great. Welcome to another Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke. I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling really good today, mainly because I get to talk about a game that I've been promising I will talk about for a very long time. I just haven't been able to get round to it because Xbox and the Summer Games Fest and beginning of June is basically the Christmas for gamers, all the new releases and stuff like that. So I wanted to do specials and I wanted to cover them. So I've had to push this one back as much as possible. But I'm back onto it. We're back into the movie tie-in specials, video game specials. Last time I spoke about Kung Fu Panda. That one, as of recording this, hasn't been released yet, so I don't know if it did well or if it did terrible. I would hope that, granted, even though it's Kung Fu Panda, it did somewhat decently. But I'm just going to go on the assumption that it did fantastically. It broke records, and it's the reason why I'm so famous and rich now. But that being said, for anybody who doesn't know, anybody who didn't listen to the Kung Fu Panda episode, I decided a while ago that a lot of people, they do video game reviews or they do movie reviews, but not many people are doing video game movie tie-in reviews, or looking into games that were made for movies or TV shows. And the reason being, well, my reason being for looking into it is because, but growing up, majority of the games that I played, majority of the shall we say, games that I owned were movie tie-in games. I have fond memories of playing the Ice Age game or playing robots on the PlayStation 2, having the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory game for the new one that came out with Johnny Depp, which, to be honest, that game was just long and tedious, but I remember I have fond memories of it. Many other games, I had Shrek 2, which was great. Every time I used to play that, I used to love it because it'd be like, hero time. I never completed it. Most of these games, I'll be honest with you, I never completed them. I would always get stuck, get frustrated, and then restart the game and start from scratch and play the game all over again. Because in my opinion, majority of kids games that came out back in the day were hard. And the reason they were hard, because majority of those games were very short, because they had to follow on with the movie, or because they had to get it out by the time the movie or TV show was out, that they had to rush development, which means you have a huge sort of difficulty gap, where basically the beginning of the game is quite easy, probably the start of development, and then as they were getting closer and closer to the release of the film or TV show, that they had to ramp up the difficulty, which made the game seem longer because it was harder. So because you were struggling, it was more just the fact of, oh god, this game's really hard. At the end of the day, it wasn't hard. It was just the fact of they just had to bump up the difficulty. And so that's why I think majority of us now, whenever we play games when we were younger, I don't think it was mainly because we were young and we're not as skilled as gamers as we are now. I think it was primarily just the case of, well, this game needs to be out by X, Y, and Z date. You have, say, 6 months to make the game from start to finish. Go for it. You know what I mean? And then it's that rush of like, okay, so we've got to make it as short as possible, but we can't make it too easy, because if it's too easy, the game will be completed within an hour. So we've got to ramp up the difficulty at certain parts. That way the game sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It seems longer, but isn't longer. And so that's my fear, as why games were so difficult when we were younger. But I decided that I wanted to look into these games. I wanted to go through the games that I had, that I gave to my brother, that he has still, as well as look online, and just find some movie tie-in games that I wanted to play when I was younger but never got the chance to, or games that I did play when I was younger but no longer own and want to go back and look at. So as I said last week, I looked into Kung Fu Panda. That was a game that I never owned, but I remember playing the demo for it. And once the demo completed, oddly enough, what made me laugh, when the demo was finished, there was a trailer for Madagascar 2, but it wasn't called Madagascar 2. It was the Crate Escape. Crate is in like a box, that sort of crate. Before it was called Escape from Africa or Escape to Africa. I'm not sure what the second Madagascar movie is called, but that was the title of the second Madagascar movie, and it always just made me laugh. So when I replayed Kung Fu Panda, there was a specials which I forgot to mention while I did last week's episode. There was a special bit where you went to special features, and you could see there was a trailer for that, and there was a trailer for the game, and then at the end of it was the banner and sort of Madagascar, the Crate Escape 2, and all that. Which I think that's a pretty better name than what there is the name they went with. But that being said, I'm going on a bit of a side quest there. But that's basically what I'm doing. That's the idea of this topic, and hopefully, if the Kung Fu Panda episode was successful, and that this one's successful, I really want to look into doing more of these, because I really enjoy talking about old games, games that have nostalgia, and just movie tie-in games. Because again, that was my childhood. That's what I grew up playing, because that was the safe bet. I knew that I would have fun with a movie tie-in game instead of going out and buying a game that isn't based off a movie or TV show, because I couldn't guarantee if I'd like it or not. So that's the idea of the concept. But today's topic, as you can see from the title, as you can see from the title, that this game that I'm going to play, it was technically a movie tie-in game, was actually going to be tied in with the films. So Alien Colonial Marines, made by Sega, actually made by Gearbox, in collaboration by Sega and 20th Century Fox. This game was meant to be canon originally, but the game flopped so hard that the shockwave from the belly flop basically made 20th Century Fox go, no, I ain't having this junk, this wreckage, this dumpster fire anywhere near my sort of really expensive, millions of $billion franchise. So you can keep it, and I'm just going to move on. And then they made Alien Isolation, which is canon, and it was an amazing game. And I still haven't completed it, but it's a far better game than what Aliens Colonial Marines was. So I thought, even though it's no longer canon, it was meant to be canon originally. And as I will get on to when I start breaking it down, there are certain parts out of this where certain characters, certain story beats, certain locations pop up, certain collectibles sort of tie in with the films. So it's one of those sort of things where I thought, what, even though it's no longer classed as a movie tie-in game, it was originally, so I thought I'd give it a look at. One of the things that makes me laugh about this game is that I'm not really going to get into it, but this game had a really troubled development cycle. From what I can remember, Sega came to Gearbox and said, can you make us this game? Gearbox said yes, no problem. It's a lot more sort of technical than that. I'm basically just giving you the brief explanation of what happened. But during the development of this game, Gearbox was also sort of working on Borderlands 2. So what Gearbox ended up doing was taking more and more people off the Aliens Colonial Marines game and putting them on other projects, primarily Borderlands 2. But they were still taking money off Sega for Aliens. Now, I don't know if the money that they were getting from Sega was being sort of used on Borderlands, or if it was being used on Aliens. I'm not really sure in that respect. But basically, the game took longer and longer to make. Sega basically got whiff of like, okay, what's going on? They found out that Gearbox was taking people off their game and putting them onto their own game, Borderlands and other things. And Sega basically said, like, if you don't get this game finished and done, we're no longer going to fund it. That's it. We're going to pull the plug, gone. And the thing is, Gearbox needed it. They needed to finish it. It was contractually obligated to finish it. So they needed to get it out. They needed to get it done. So they rushed it. And then the game came out, and well, the rest is history. We know how bad the game released and the way it looks, and it was nowhere near the E3 trailer, which is, if you see the E3 trailer, Google it. It's an amazing trailer, the E3 trailer. One of the best, actually, cinematic trailers is for this game. For any Aliens game, it's this. But it's nowhere near what it was meant to be, what was shown at E3, what was promised. and that's just because Gearbox got greedy. They just was like, well, we can take our cake and eat it, but also we want to take our cake and we want to eat it elsewhere. I.e., we want to make this game, but at the same stage, we want to make a game that we know that's going to be successful and a lot of people want. That's Borderlands 2, so we're going to work on that. So the game was doomed doomed to begin with, and it's a shame because I'll get into it, but I quite enjoyed myself. I enjoyed myself with this game. It was interesting, when it worked, it worked. That's the best thing I can say. But no spoilers as of yet. I'm going to jump into all that in a minute. But yes, that's basically the history. That's the topic, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So if it's something you're interested in, follow me down the rabbit hole. We're going to dive into this ex communique. Once was, or I don't know what you would call it. Once great, could have been great movie tie-in game that no longer is classed as a movie tie-in game, but I'm going to class it anyway because originally it was planned to be a movie tie-in game. So join me down that rabbit hole. It should be a fun one. So let's get into it, shall we? So, Aliens Colonial Marines. What happened? Well, as I explained in the introduction, a lot happened. But let me try and break it down for you. So, start off with the story. So, instead of me giving you a sort of really brief explanation of what happened in the story, I'm going to read the back of the box, and actually, from looking through the actual game manual, there is a longer blurb in that. So, I'll read that, and hopefully, from there, you can get a sense of idea of what the story is about. So this is from the back of the box. So this is what you would see when you pick it up off the shelf. Oh, Alien Colonial Marines. That's interesting. I like aliens. What's it about? You flip it round. This is what you'll see. So it goes, fight the fear. After the events of the landmark Alien trilogy, the Colonial Marines are sent on a rescue mission to the planet LV-426, caught between the most dangerous alien species in the universe and the ruthless Weyland-Yutani Corporation. The hunters become the hunted. So that's what's on the back of the box. Now, when you got home and not everybody used to, I loved manuals. One of the things I loved about old games, you don't really get them anymore, but I miss a manual. I miss a good chunky manual. This one I hold in my hands for the game is not really quite chunky. It's actually quite thin, to be honest. But if you're like me, you get home and the first thing you do is you pop open the manual and you go for the manual and you just see what they're adding. Back some games, they added like little Easter eggs, little notes, little stuff like that, little jokes. Especially, for example, one of my favorite games from the 360 era was the Overlord franchise. I played Overlord 1 and I played Overlord 2. But what I loved about Overlord 2 is when you opened it, it was all in colour. It wasn't black and white. There was little doodles and little drawings, and like there were tips from the developers about certain levels and certain areas. And I remember back in the day, I think it was like PlayStation 2 and like the Xbox days. You used to have cheat codes. You used to open up the manual, and there used to be cheat codes in manuals. I miss that. You don't really get that anymore because if you want to have a manual, it's always a code. Oh, you want to see how to play the game? Go to this web link, and there you go. I'm like, no, I understand why they no longer do it because of recycling, and we've got to be a lot more sort of wasting paper and all that. So I understand as to why they no longer put manuals in gaming. I just I miss them. It's a bit of nostalgia that I have, but again, I understand why they don't do it. But again, like I said, moving on back to the topic because I did a bit of a side quest there. If you're like me, you would pick up a manual and you would read through it. And from looking at the manual, there's actually a more sort of in-depth story blurb in this. So again, it's Fight the Fear. So taking place 17 weeks after the 1986 science fiction masterpiece, Aliens Colonial Marines is the video game continuation of Aliens that drives headfirst into the rich tapestry that was originally created over 25 years ago. A distress signal sent out by Corporal Dwayne Hicks is picked up by the the Stoga class ship US. Oh god, this is really hard. Sapporo, yeah. But upon their arrival, something is not as it should be. The ship Ellen Ripley, Hicks, and Newt were on, the USS Sulaco, is back in orbit over LV-426 and not over the planet Fury 161 as it should be. The Marines of the Prura investigate the ship and begin to unravel a mystery involving the corporation Weyland Yutani. Can the Marines figure out how the corporation is involved and with what is happening on the surface of the planet before it's too late? Sorry about me not being able to read there. It's not just my dyslexia. These are generally pretty big, long words that I'm like, my brain was just stopped. Yeah, most people just be like, oh, I know that word. I can read that word. Me is like, I don't recognize that word. But again, one of the downsides of doing a podcast, you can't do long pauses because then people are like, oh God, the sounds have gone out. It's broken. And people start to panic. So thank you for holding on for there for my terrible reading. But that's a lot better explanation about what the story is than the back of the box. I know, again, it's the back of the box. They've got to sort of like catch your eye there and then. But I'd be more caught up if they, had a bit more of the blurb that's in the manual on the back of the box, especially how majority of the back of the box is taken up by Xbox Live and a lot of the technical jargon being like all rights belong to Dolby Atmos and blah 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 blah. I'm like, well, skim that down a bit and just give us a bit more. But that's basically from what's in the manual and to do with the story. I also got the Extermination Edition for like £2.99 off eBay, and it comes with loads of codes because it's like this is from Game, the video game sellers in the UK, and they had exclusive content like gear upgrade boost, gain early access to epic weapon upgrades, sawn off double barrel shotgun, and limited edition content for movie Marines, Ripley's flamethrower, and additional Marine customization. They've all got the things, they're all in here, and they've all got the codes with them, but because obviously this is secondhand, I never bothered trying them because they're most likely been used, and even if they haven't been used, what's the point? Because majority of them are for the multiplayer, and the server's no longer up. Anyway, moving on to the actual story itself. So that's the blurb. That's basically what comes with the box. That's what you'd see when you buy it, and when you bought it, when you read the manual, that's basically what you would read. And as for a story, and as for what it is, you play as Ethan Winters. You are a Colonial Marine that gets woken up out of cryosleep, and as I said, your job is to go on to the Sulaco and basically figure out what happened and what happened to all the Marines. Basically, moving on from the story of Aliens 2. But to be honest, there's not much to your character. Your character doesn't speak, and even when the character really does speak, it's a lot of sort of military jargon. Oh, over there by the door. Oh, get back! Aliens are coming through. See, like there's nothing really to get you into the story, and once the story itself isn't really unique. There's a lot of predictability about it. Usually, what I would do is, like, oh, I don't really want to spoil it. I don't really, I want people to play it. But this is a game that, to be honest, if you were going to play it, you would have played it by now. Mainly because of what it is, and we all know a history of it being a very terrible game. So if you was going to play it, you would have either played it when it came out and decided not, or you would have heard about it and decided you're not going to play it. So in all means, I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody because I doubt anybody's going to want to go out and play it. But if you do, it's extremely cheap and you can find it really easily. Honestly, the game is pennies right now. But the story's predictable. It's not really unique. You get on the ship, you go to rescue your teammates. One of your teammates has basically had an alien facehugger on their face. At this point on, they don't really understand what a facehugger is or what it does. Me being a hardcore Aliens fan, I was like, kill her, leave her on her own. The best thing to do would be, it sounds horrible, sounds cruel, but the best thing to do would be to shoot her in the head, to kill her, and that way it will kill the baby, and then that means one less xenomorph. But obviously they didn't know, so we're following on the game. That kind of brought me out of the game. I was like, I know she's not going to survive. I know at any moment her chest is going to burst, and I'm going to have to deal with what comes out of her chest. You know what I mean? So at many moments, I'm like, just when is she going to die? Like, I know it's going to happen sometime soon. So it was predictable. Like, they were like saying, oh, we've got to get her down to the surface because Weyland Yutani are down there. And they've found a way to extract the aliens out of the stomach without killing the person. And I'm like, no, No, that technology doesn't work because the creature has defense mechanisms and stuff like that. Once it's in there, it will come out when it's ready. There's no way of taking it out once it's in. Um, but I was okay. I was like, you know what? Fair enough. It's a video game. I've got to sort of switch my brain off. I'll go in. Um, and lo and behold, we get to that point. We've gone for hours of gameplay. We get to that point to basically find out that yeah, there's no way of the alien coming out. And then she gets on the table. Alien pops out. The other guy that we're with, basically is in love with this woman, and then shoots the alien in the head as it pops out, and that's it. And then we move on. Obviously, that's one of the story beats. There's a few more story beats. You've got to go find Hicks because Hicks is currently being um, held prisoner by Weyland-Yutani. Weyland-Yutani are also basically being Weyland-Yutani, being the evil corporation that they are, and that they are basically trying to weaponize the xenomorphs, and they are growing um, the eggs and incubating the eggs and studying the face huggers and studying the babies that come out of people and basically infecting people, getting them to have their chest bursts and stuff like that. If you're a big hardcore Aliens fan like me, you know all this already. You've read the books, as have I. We all know how bad Weyland-Yutani are. So the game basically goes from you fight aliens to now you fight mercenaries, basically fight Weyland-Yutani, and then the game basically goes from being an aliens game to being a first-person shooter. A very unfair first-person shooter, but that's basically the story. There's not much to it really. It follows on from Aliens 2. It's not really unique. There's nothing about it that I would say is memorable apart from the gameplay, which is, when it works, it's fine, but I'll get into that bit in a minute. But as for the story itself, it's not really memorable. It's predictable. You know what's going to happen with that part with the person with their popping out the chest. You know that that's going to happen, and it does happen. And we know we're not going to save her, but we got to do it anyway. But it's meant to be one of them moments that make you want to care about the characters, like emphasize. I'm like, no, I'm not going to emphasize because I've only just met this character, and once I've met her, she woke up with an alien facehugger next to her. I know she's going to die, so I don't have any emotional attachment. I will never have any emotional attachment with her because I know what's going to happen. Now, if we had met her and you didn't tell me or gave me any hint that she had a facehugger on her before I met her, then you would have given me a chance to get to know her story, really sort of emote and connect to her. So when the events come to pass, pardon me, I'm sorry, when the events come to pass where the alien's about to, chest burst, I'm like, oh my god, she's gonna die. This is really sad. I've got an emotional connection with her. Oh, this is horrible. Then, fair enough, but it didn't. It just didn't happen. There was never that moment. Um, but that's one of the things about this story is the fact of they try to connect it to the Aliens 2 and have like a kind of continuation in between Aliens 2 and Aliens 3. It just didn't do a good job. It Like I said, it's not really memorable. Your main character doesn't do much, and like the, the way it ends, the boss fight at the end is just terrible. You have a boss fight with the Queen, and it's not really a boss fight. It's just more of the fact of press buttons. Okay, you press these buttons. Now go over here. Wait until the Queen stands on the platform. Press a button. Then the Queen basically gets launched out of the spaceship, and then and that's it. And then it ends basically. Whoever's left of your Marines, whoever survived to the end, basically goes. We've got to stop Weyland-Yutani. We've got to save our Marines. Um, and then that's it. It leaves it open for like a sequel. It leaves it open for more. And I giggled at the end, one because the terrible enemy, the terrible sort of boss fight, but also the fact of they were so hopeful that there were going to be more after this, even though I feel like they knew themselves that this game was a mess, and that this game, like it felt like they were selling it on the name alone, that like the Aliens name will save it, and that we didn't have to do that well of a job. Like people will buy it because of the Aliens franchise, and then we can justify to Sega that basically, look, it did well, it made loads of money. Can we make a sequel, please? You know what I mean? That's not really been said. That's sort of my sort of assumption and theory from finishing the story. But yeah, it made me giggle. So that's the story. That's basically what you get. That's the package. There's not, like I said, there's not much to it. But they tried, but they failed. So I'm going to move on now to the gameplay. So let's go on to gameplay, shall we? The part of the game that's actually memorable, the part of the game that everybody knows because how bad it was, even though you might be surprised about what I'm going to say about it. So let's get into it, shall we? Right, so onto the gameplay. So for this, I'm going to return back to the video game box. So underneath the story blurb, the next thing that you would see is two nodes. You've got one for campaign mode and one for competitive mode. We're going to focus on the campaign mode. So this is what you get on the campaign. You've got campaign mode. Underneath that, you've got a marine shooting a xenomorph, and while the xenomorph is being held back by a guy in a loader. And underneath you've got 2 bullet points. First bullet point being wheeled smart guns, motion trackers, and flamethrowers in the ultimate alien first-person shooter. Next bullet point: seamless and cinematic solo and 4-player co-op, drop in, drop out. So that's basically all you get in terms of the campaign mode. My opinion on the campaign mode, and again, you might be shocked about what I'm going to say, but from me playing, I played it twice. Played it once on my own, and I played it a second time in co-op mode. I didn't finish it in co-op mode, but I played it a bit to test it, so I have something to talk about for you guys here. But from playing it on my own, the first time round, it's fun. Only, right? There is a but. There is a but coming. It's fun when it works. When it works is when you are in very tight corridors, when you're going through ships, when the lighting is right, when you can hear the xenomorphs, you can hear the aliens around you, and then they kind of run at you. At those stages, you get a shotgun out and you blow them in the face, and there's like they obviously when you kill a xenomorph, they drop acid, and if you walk on the acid, obviously you lose health, but you can't start regenerating health because your health automatically regenerates. But if you stand in acid, your health won't automatically regenerate for a while. And obviously, when you're surrounded by xenomorphs and you're surrounded by this acid, it's one of them moments of like, okay, I've got to sort of keep moving. But when it works, it works. When it's in tight knit corridors, which is where aliens and xenomorphs, where it should be. When you play an alien game, you want to be in a tight space corner that any moment it could be on the ceiling, be behind you, be on the walls. Very scary, very spooky. That's when it works. When it's very tight knit. Where it falls to pieces is when you go to the bigger sandboxes. When you go to because this start of this game, majority of the beginning of the game, you're on a ship. You're going through corridors and you're going from room to room. Again, works fine. Then when you start going to the bigger areas like cargo holds and really sort of like I would say like transport sort of corridors where like you transport big cargo, where it's big wide open spaces, you got like a big glass mirror on your left of like the planet below you, that sort of thing, to give like a scale of how big this room is. So then you got aliens on all the walls coming at you, but it would be scary if it was loads of xenomorphs coming at you. But because it's not loads coming at you, it seems very much as a fact of okay, they all follow the same pattern. And I'll get onto the AI in a minute, but they're all following the same pattern, all going the same direction. So then I'm just sort of aiming in that one direction, and I'm just opening fire in that one wall or that one corridor, like the one sort of them coming at me from the front or them above me. They're all following the same pattern. They're like ants. They all follow the same direction. They don't go off the path. So when the game is tight, it works and it's fun and it's interesting. Like you have the motion tracker on, and the noises is fantastic. Like the noise of the guns sounds perfect. The noise of the motion tracker is perfect. All of it is member berries. All of it is nostalgia for my love of the Aliens franchise. I can see it, or I can still hear it in my head. The motion tracker, the blue, blue, blue. I can still hear that in my head. I can hear the sound of a pulse rifle, the way it sounds when you shoot it, the way it sounds when you reload. I can still hear that because those sounds are iconic with the Aliens franchise. And for that stage, they got it right. And again, it works when you're in tight corridor. But when you get to the big sandboxes, it just falls to pieces. And this is where the AI comes in. And this is where the joke of the whole but the joke of this whole franchise comes from, in terms of this game, should I say, is the fact of the AI for the aliens is it's janky. It's okay. Like I said, it works. When it works, it works. But when it doesn't, it's janky as hell. Like I said, it gets predictable. They follow the same paths all the time. They don't always, like, they never change. There's never a moment where, like, oh, each encounter is different. No, each encounter is the same. Like I said, I played the game twice, right? And each encounter was the same. They all come from the same. They always come from the same directions, the same spawn points. Sometimes it'd be from the wall, sometimes it's from behind you. So I'm sure if you played this game a few times, you could probably, by pure muscle memory, remember, okay, they're going to be like 2 or 3 going to come from the left, and then 2 or 3 are going to come from the right, and then one person's going to come from the ceiling, and then one guy's going to come from behind me. Okay, killed him. Okay, next room, go. It's so predictable. The AI is not clever at all, and there'll be moments where the AI will run at you. Like, there were moments, like, I was walking and there was like some stairs, right? And I've gone to go walk up these stairs, and there was about 2 or 3 Xenos. So I've just backed off, and I'm shooting them. So as I've backed off, I've gone halfway down, not even all the way down the stairs. I've just gone down the stairs a bit, and this one Xeno is basically charging at me, and it got to the top of the stairs and just stopped for no reason whatsoever. Just stopped, and I stopped shooting because I expected it to run after me. And I wish I recorded it. Like, I wish I had some footage of it, but it just stopped dead. And it was kind of like it had a phobia of stairs, very much as the Xena was like, I'm gonna get, oh god, stairs, damn it, my one weakness, stairs. It was like going up against a Dalek, you know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna go up against a Dalek, you go up some stairs because they can't fly. Well, they can in newer canon, but originally that was the best way to get with a Dalek. You went down a slope, or you went up or down stairs. That's the best way to get away from them. That's a bit of a side quest there from Doctor Who. But that's basically what it was. You got to the stairs, and the aliens would just like, no, I don't want to go downstairs. And that happened more than a few times, where you'd go into a room and they wouldn't come through the door. Sometimes they would come through the door, or sometimes they wouldn't come through the same door, even though they just came through that door. I don't know. There were times where the AI just didn't work. It was silly. But you didn't notice it when you was in those tight knit corridors. When you was in the tight corridors, that's when you sort of felt the immersion of, like, oh, this is like an Aliens game. And then when you went to those huge sandboxes where, like, there was more areas where the aliens spawn from, even though they all spawn from the same location, you noticed the jank. There'd be moments where I would kill an alien, and for no reason whatsoever, I would kill the alien. I'd kill the Xeno, and the alien. It was like somebody put a jetpack on the Xenomorph. Like, I've killed it, and woof, flew up into the sky, disappeared, and that happened multiple times. I'd shoot an alien, and woof, right in front of me, up into the sky, disappear, like they would just be shot up to heaven. Like, that's it. Bless you, my son. I take you thee, and up they would go. It was hilarious. I had so, like, this game. Granted, it's not great, but the AI, even though it doesn't always work, it's just funny. Like, I had so much enjoyment at this game just of it being broken. Like, granted, if it was working, like I said, when it works, it was fun. When it was broken, it was funny. Like, there was never like a game-breaking bug where it just broke my game completely. I never had that. It was just more silly bugs. It was bugs that just, should have been noticed, should have been ironed out. And the reason is for that, it's been found a couple of years ago that somebody basically went into the code of this game, and they found, because when you go into the code, like I did a bit of coding in college and university, when you do coding, you have to make sure that you are correct. You can't make any mistake. The simplest mistake of putting a comma where it shouldn't be, or putting a dash, or putting a bracket, or putting a capital letter where there should be a lowercase letter, no matter how, even if the rest of the code is perfect, if you make one mistake, it can break the whole code, right? And that's basically what happened here with Alien Colonial Marines. Somebody went into the code and found that one of the programmers, instead of a capital P, they put a lowercase p. So basically, the guy changed it, put a capital P in, and from what I've heard, it fixed the AI a bit, but it didn't make them perfect. So the AI still would have been somewhat bad, but they would have been better if that coder had done a better, say better job. It's not really fair because coding's really hard. But if they had have noticed it, if, like, the game, like, somebody had gone in and be like, oh, you made a mistake there. But what you have to also remember, again, this is why I'm not making fun of it, is why I'm not making joking about it so much in the terms of the programmer's perspective, because I did it. It's hard. It's not an easy thing. But you have to imagine there will be tons and tons and tons of lines of code, loads, and that you have to imagine that it's easy to miss something that's meant to, like, so if it's just one thing and it's meant to be a capital, but you put it as an undercase, it's quite hard to notice that sometimes. So that's why I don't blame the programmers for that. I know a lot of people would, but I don't, because I've been there. I've learned. I've been through college, been through university. It's difficult. I've made that mistake many times. My tutor made that mistake many times. It's a common mistake, but it's one of them things we can laugh at. We can laugh at it because it's the fact of, even if um, the programmer had done it done it the way it was meant to be, and hadn't made the mistake that they made, the game probably would have might have been better received. Maybe, maybe not. Like from what I've heard and what I've read, it fixes the AI to a point, but the AI is still not as good. So would that fix would have if that fix would have been there originally, would it have been better for the game? We don't know. But like I said, I enjoy the jank. I don't mind bad games. I don't mind playing a game that has a bad reputation or has a jank. As long as it doesn't break the game completely, like it basically overloads and then shuts the game off, or bricks my console or anything like that, then I'm happy to play a game that, or has jank in it, especially if it's funny jank, and this is funny jank. But the game, the gameplay, it's not bad. Like, when it works, it works. But when it doesn't, you can see it, and that's where the jokes and that's where the piss taking comes in. And you can easily piss take. And like, from what I remember, because it's not long ago that I completed it. I don't remember seeing many bugs, many issues when I was playing indoors, apart from the few where they couldn't come through doors, or they wouldn't chase me downstairs. But apart from that, I never found any sort of real tangible issue with the indoors parts. It was just the outdoors was when it was more just the fact of, okay, this game is broken. And there were a lot more outdoor sections than indoor sections, sadly. I would prefer the more indoor section, because then that's what it should be. It should be tight, close combat, CQB, close quarters combat, fighting with Xenos. That's what I wanted. But that's not what you get, really. You get it for a bit, but you don't get it a lot. And then when the game turns into a first-person shooter with the mercenaries for Weyland-Yutani, the game just becomes really generic and boring. And the AI, I would say, for me personally, I thought the AI was a bit better on the Marines, because they will try to flank you and they will try to go around. But again, even then, I'm giving it too much credibility. I'm being too nice. Even then, their AI is not as good. Like, they will try and get around you and flank you, yes, but it's not like what you find if you played the first Fear. If you ever play Fear 1, the AI there is perfect. They do try to flank you and they do try to get behind you. It's flawless how good that AI is. It's not on that level, but it's somewhat more comparable, more functional than what you get with the Xenos. But even then, like I said, it's just generic and boring, those gameplay parts, and I didn't enjoy those parts at all. I wanted to be fighting Xenos all the way through. But that's the gameplay. Not really much more to say. Add on with the gameplay, you've got the world building. The levels are well crafted, are amazing, but the graphics let it down. Basically, the game, you can see that they worked closely with 20th Century Fox, and they worked closely with Sega of trying to create this to make it feel and look like something from the Aliens franchise. You can tell that's what they tried to do. But the problem is the graphics is not very good. So the detail doesn't pop all the time, and when you do get up and close, you have so much texture pop in, and so the textures are not always fully rendered, or the textures don't render at all, because the texture popping is really, really bad. And again, that could be the fact of the PlayStation, the Xbox that I played on. It maybe is an old system, or that's just how it was when it came out. I don't know. It was just the fact of the texture popping was terrible. It was really laughable. So I couldn't see the detail as much as I wanted to see when I was on the ships. But I could still walk through the ships and be like, okay, yes, this is something out of Aliens. I do recognize this, and I do recognize that. It does look like it belongs here. The parts where it works the best for me is when you go down to the ship, you go down to the planet, and you find out what Weyland-Yutani are doing. You find your way into a engineers, Prometheans. You find your way into an engineer ship, the horseshoe sort of ship, and those ships, like I mentioned it before, I'm a big fan of H.R. Geiger, and those ships are designed from his artwork. They are very Geiger-esque. And when you go through those sort of moments, when you go through those levels, again, the level design works fantastically. It looks beautiful. It looks exactly like out of the movies. There'll be a moment where you go into the engineer sort of space jockey. I think it's called the space jockey. That's what they called it, which was basically, it looks like a gun, but it's like you have the engineer that sits in the seat and it kind of looks at the stars, and you have loads of chairs around it. That looked like it was straight out of Prometheus. That looked like it was straight out of Alien. And then you go to the rooms where the eggs are being stored. Again, when you look at those eggs, it looks exactly like out the film. So there are moments where, like, okay, I remember this from the film, or I remember this from like Prometheus. Like, it works, like it looks exactly like it was meant to fit. So when the world building works, when the graphics and when, you know, certain moments in the game want you to see it, but other moments, like when you're in tight knit corridors, the graphics are usually quite good, and the detail and the textures and the world building is great. And then when you go to the huge sandbox areas, that's when they fall to pieces and the texture pop in. And like the problem with this game is that they decided to go sandbox. They decided to go, okay, we'll have linear shooting, and then we'll just open it up. And now you're on the planet, we'll have huge linear sandboxes that you can run around. But no, you should have made it more linear. Like, granted, we're in a huge sandbox, but take us through caves. You know, and you do go through a few caves, but, you know, take us through caves, take us through derelict towns, and like have buildings around us, have like a settlement. Take us through a settlement, and we've got to go through the buildings of the settlement to, like, you know, there's like a truck that's in the way, so we've got to go a few buildings to building. Make it close quarters. Have Xenos come through the windows, that sort of thing. Make it aliens. Like, if you ever, I don't know if anybody ever played Aliens versus Predator on the 360. I did. I loved it. There was 3 campaigns. You had the Marines, you had the Xenomorphs, and you had the Yayucha, the predators. Yes, I am sad. I know the name of the predators, the Yayucha. I'm a big fan of them. Leave me alone. I'm a nerd. Okay, I love this stuff. But you had 3 campaigns, and like the Marines campaign was scary. It was close quarters. Like, it terrified me. It still scares me now when I play it. Even though it's a lot more, it's a lot older than what you get here with Colonial Marines, but it just looks better in my opinion. And the Aliens, the Xenomorph campaign was good, but it was really, really easy. And then the Predator again was good, but again extremely easy. But I enjoyed the overarching story, how each one of them followed a story. But their Marine section was good. It was very linear. You went from room to room, and even when it opened up, you were still very sort of, you felt claustrophobic even in a wide open space, and that's what it should feel like. You should feel claustrophobic in an open space, because at any moment you don't know if you're going to be swarmed by Xenos. Like, one Xenomorph on their own is terrifying. You know, that's how scary and powerful Xenomorphs are. One of them on their own, even a standard worker, a small worker, is dangerous. You know, and we've seen that many times through the films. That one on their own is powerful. Like, if you play Alien Isolation, Ripley gets hunted for majority of the first half of the game by one Xenomorph, just one, and it's a worker. It's nothing special. It's a worker. You know, um, but even so, it's a threat. But and that's what you should feel. You should feel like, even if you only have one Xenomorph like behind you, you should feel claustrophobic in an open space. You should feel scared. You should feel like you can't breathe at any moment. It could pop out and get you. But there's never that moment in this game. Never ever. And the motion tracker, I used it for a bit for an achievement. But then after that, after I unlocked the achievement, I didn't really use it. I only used it mainly just be like, if like, because I knew what, like, the enemies were coming. Like I said, it's very formulaic. I know where the enemies are coming from, so there was never a need to be like, oh, I need to pull up to see if they're coming from somewhere different. I know that they're going to come from the middle left or top right, or come from behind me. So I'd pop it up, be like, okay, they're behind me, turn around, I'd never use it again. So I used it at first for nostalgia and for the achievement. Then afterwards, I used it less and less as I further went through the game, because there was less and less I felt claustrophobic, less and less I felt scared, less and less I felt that I needed it. That it was so formulaic, I just knew where they're coming from. And the world build, like, again, the world building doesn't help that especially in the tight knit corners. Again, it works, but when you go to the sandbox, it just falls to pieces, and that's what I feel like the game to me just falls to pieces when you get to those open sections. Um, so that's the world building. So that's the story. That's the world building. The collectibles, you have your standard dog tags. That again, most people wouldn't do these. I do it because I like collectibles and I like achievements because I'm an achievement hunter. So I went through and I collected all the collectibles. So the standard dog tags, there's not much to them. If you go into the collectibles section in the main menu, you'll find each dog tag and there'll be like a little quote. Again, I don't know, I didn't read them all. I don't know if these are quotes from the films or anything like that, but or these were just like quotes from like people that made the game. I don't know. But these tags, you just collect them. There's not much to them. The only sort of there's only really worth collecting them because you XP. So in the way this game works, I forgot to mention it in the gameplay, but the way this game works is that you have a leveling system. So the more Xenos that you kill, and if you find collectibles, you get XP. And this XP can go towards unlocking weapons and unlocking weapon upgrades. Again, the weapon upgrades aren't that great. The ones you really, really want are the ones that give you more accuracy, especially when you get the open sections where you're going to need the accuracy to take down the Marines and take out the Xenos coming at you from a long distance. You're going to want the accuracy on the pulse rifle, and you're going to want the accuracy on the shotguns so that you can do sort of shoot from the hip and always guarantee you're going to hit them. So in terms, the upgrades are not really sort of needed. They're just kind of there to kind of pad him. But that's the only reason you would find that you'd find all of the dog tags, so you could level up quicker. It all goes towards the multiplayer section, which I'll get onto in a minute. So the dog tag's not worth it unless you want to get XP. And for the achievement, same for the audio logs. The audio logs, you get XP for getting them. Actually, funny enough, I wrote this in my notes that the audio logs have a better story than the main game. This is true. This is true when I wrote it, and it's true now. Basically, the audio logs, you can find them online if you want to listen to them. There's not many of them. There's about 6, and they don't go on for that long. Like 5-6 minutes. It'll probably run you by. But the audio logs that you find throughout the game basically tell a story of a scientist working for Weyland-Yutani, and that it starts off with the scientist is very sort of naive, very sort of excited, being like, okay, I was working on Earth, and I've now been contracted by Weyland-Yutani, being a big company, to do some R&D, some research for them. I've got my own sort of lab, and everything's going great, and everything is just sort of perfect. Everything is just fantastic. And then, as you go finding more audio logs, you basically realize that this guy, over time, he realizes that he's working for the bad guys, that he is a bad guy in himself now, that, all the test subjects that he was working on were people that were kidnapped, and that they were human live test subjects. He didn't know that, he thought they were animals. And basically, as you go through the story, you realize this scientist goes through the motions of like, this is wrong, what we're doing. Also, you get sort of hints of like a commander of like this Marine group who's trying to keep everything under control, the security officer trying to keep the Xenos under control. And this story is just more interesting. You learn more about the background of the people that were here before you, and about what Weyland-Yutani are doing. So that part of it, is quite fascinating. And like I said, it's a more interesting story than what you get, and a more heartfelt story than what you get from this game. And it just made me laugh when I realized that, when I went back and I listened to them one after the other, and I was like, this is actually a better story now. I would actually rather play this game or even see this game than the game I just finished. So that made me laugh. But again, you don't need to collect them, but I would say if you're there for if you're there like for completion's sake and for the achievements, then get them. I would just say, like, if you want to hear the story, just go onto YouTube and listen to the audio logs. They're quite good, a lot better. Another thing you can collect is legendary weapons from the movies, like Hick's shotgun or Hudson's pulse rifle. which I thought was really, really cool. They don't give you any buffs. They don't give you any sort of extra damage or anything like that, or not that I could find. They just cosmetically, they look better, and some act differently. So they look like the characters' guns and weapons from the films. I found myself using Hicks's shotgun the most because, especially when you're in close quarters combat, pulse rifles are good at first, and it's fun just to spray and pay, or short control bursts. But you realistically, eventually, you was like, you know what, it'd be best if I just use a shotgun, and so that's why I did. I ended up using Hicks's shotgun all the way through the game. Really, I kept that on me. I never really used any of the other guns unless I was against the mercenaries, and like they were pissing me off. So I would just change my gun to like a battle rifle, and I would kill them from afar, and it would just be so much easier that I'd be like, you know what, that's what I'm gonna do from now on, because it's just 10 times easier than having to just go cover. But yeah, I also mentioned one of the things that you can find. It's not really a collect. Well, it is a collectible, but you don't collect it. It's more just the fact that it's more like a member berries reference. But there is a really, really cool section when you're in like these sewers, trying to sneak around and try to hide away from these really specific sort of xenomorphs. And one of the things you can find while in the sewer is Newt's doll head. Now, if anybody remembers from Aliens 2, Newt, she had a doll, and she ends up losing its head. And you can find that head, and you get an achievement for it. I found it by accident. I just walking around hiding, and then an achievement popped. I was like, okay, what's this? So I look at the achievement, and it was like, oh, you found Newt's doll's head. I was like, okay. So I turned around, and there it was, just sitting there, looked all sort of disheveled and horrible. Like it's been there for a long time. I was like, oh, that's cool, member berries. But that was it. So that's for gameplay, world build, levels design, world building, and collectibles. Next section is going to be talking about multiplayer, and then my overall thoughts. So let's have a break, let's relax. I think I needed a drink of water myself, and afterwards we'll talk about the multiplayer that no longer really exists. Okay, let's get into it. Right, so the unexisted competitive mode, the multiplayer. So we're going to go refer back to the back of the box again, and we're going to look at the competitive mode section. So you got the competitive mode, and this will give you a picture of two of the main characters that you meet in the campaign, and then a xenomorph jumping at a guy, which looks really cool, which looks really dramatic. That never happens in the video game. Well, in the video game, that never happens in the main story at all. At any moment in time, there's never a cinematic moment like that, which the game needed moments like that, but it never does. But anyway, that being said, so that's what you see. Again, you get 2 bullet points saying 2 unique ways to play: deadly aliens or hardened marines. Take the fear to a new level and hunt down your enemies across 4 epic modes. There's not really much to it. I even checked the manual, and there's not really much to say about the multiplayer either. But I couldn't test it. I couldn't test any of it. Even local co-op, playing with 2-player with my brother, we couldn't test any of the multiplayer games. So I can't tell you if they were good or not, if they worked or not. It just wouldn't work. You know, the servers are down in terms of the Xbox. Maybe if you had this on PC, the servers would still be up, and you'd be able to do sort of you'd be able to play with your mates through there. I don't know. But for me, playing on the 360, I couldn't test it. What I could test though was the campaign. And I'll be honest with you, it worked, but it was horrible. It was it was deplorable. It was disgusting. I hated it. It made my I wear glasses, right? If it's well, it's obviously it's not evident because this is an audio format. This is not a visual format, but I wear glasses, right? I'm long sighted, but short sightedness not very good. Goes all blurry. So I don't need to wear glasses all the time, but I do because it's mainly for when I'm on my phone or playing on the Xbox or watching TV or blood X, Y, and Z. But I'm always usually doing something like that, or I'm always reading, so I always wear them. And I never ever have an issue with when I wear them with my eyes hurting or getting headaches. But with this game, the way that they have sectioned it for 2-player is a nightmare. So I played a lot of 2-player games where they split the screen, right? growing up, majority of people have done the same. The way this game does it, instead of like horizontally, like right down the middle, right, and you have somebody on the right, somebody on the left, which is fine. I don't mind that, it works, right? It's this. The people who made this game decided to go vertical, so they went right. They went, instead of going down the middle, they went across. So they split it in half. So you've got a top and you've got a bottom, right? Which is completely fine if you're player 2 and you're on the bottom. But if you're player 1 and at the top, your screen is smushed. You have a smaller screen on the top than you do on the bottom. So it's horrible. So I'm player 1, so I'm stuck at the top of a tiny screen. Already my eyes are starting to hurt because I'm trying to focus on this small sort of screen. But also the fact of, because the screen below me is bigger, my brother's screen, player 2, I keep finding myself looking down at his screen to see what he's doing, thinking it's part of my screen, so then I'm getting lost and I'm getting attacked. It was a nightmare. Like, we played on a big sort of TV. It wasn't like we were playing on a small tiny TV. We played on a biggish TV. But even so, my section was smushed. It was horrible, and it gave me a headache, and I didn't want to play it. And like, I really hope that one day my brother doesn't say to me, "Let's continue playing," because I really don't want to. One of the upsides of playing in 2-player was the fact if I could get a few achievements that I couldn't get for playing on my own. That was the only upside. But I tested it with my brother, and it was meh. It was terrible. Like, this is 4-player co-op. I would hate to, like, I guess if you played 4-player co-op, it might be better, the fact of you all get an individual tiny screen. But no, it was horrible playing 2-player. One of the worst things about 2-player was you could tell that the game you could tell the game couldn't work in 2-player. Like I mentioned, there were times where you had texture popping and things like that, but never once did I have any lag or any issue like that. But when I played in 2-player, there was a section, and almost at the beginning of the game, there was a section where you're in this like air hangar, and you have to hold this position while they get the door open, and you get swarmed by loads of Xenos. So I said to my brother, "You look at the left, I'll look at the right, and we'll just sort of work that way." Obviously, my brother not being as good at shooting games, his sort of front line, they broke through his front line. They came in and they swarmed him, which is fine. That's not the issue I'm going to explain. The issue I'm going to explain is, once they started to swarm, once they were surrounded us, and like we were just like I don't know what it was, but we were close together and we were shooting at the same time and we're shooting the same enemies, that the game, when the frames dropped so much that the game started to judder and the enemies started to lag. And I would be honest, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we went down to say like 2 frames per second, because the game was going so slow, so slow, so jittery. And I could hear the Xbox. It sounded like a helicopter. It's like it was going to take off. It's like, I was like, oh, I thought this Xbox, like the Xbox 360, like it's not old. It's like it's an elite, but it's still old, relative to what we have now. And you could just tell, like, this console's like, please stop it. I'm gonna die. This hurts. This is horrible. This is torture. And so hopefully, luckily we managed to kill the Xenos really quickly. And I was like, oh god, this is not good. And as we went through section to section, it was okay when we had a few enemies on screen. But whenever there was loads of enemies on screen and we was all shooting at the same time, and any of us threw a grenade, oh god, he was like, blasphemy, don't mention it. You throw a grenade, the game goes, what? It's like, no, can't do it. Frames drop and characters are not doing what they're meant to do, and the Xenos are doing like weird sort of Michael Jackson spinny moves on the ground. I don't know what's going on. And my eyes are hurting and my head's hurting. I'm like, I don't want to play this thing in co-op anymore. Like, maybe if you played it with your friends, like if they had a copy and they were playing at home and I was playing at home, and like, we had our own screens, then I would say the game maybe would have worked better. But playing 2-player, oh, it was horrible. Like, we had that experience with 2-player. Like, again, God forbid we ever play with more than 2, 3 or 4. This console would kill itself. Like, literally, I don't have a gun, but I'm sure my console would find one and shoot itself with it, because it just sounded like it was taking off to go to space. It was just, it was horrible. I felt so sorry for it. Afterwards I turned it off, and you could feel the heat coming off it. Like, I've played like Prototype 1, Prototype 2, and I played other games on it recently, and even games that are very sort of visually sort of strenuous of the console. Even that didn't heat the console up, made it overheat. After I turned the console off, I put my hand on top of the console. That console was a lot hotter than what it is normally. So that was worrying for me. So I was like, you know what, I don't think I want to put it through that again. But that's my experience with the multiplayer, playing local co-op. Maybe it would have been better if I got a chance to play the online modes, but never got to because servers are down, doesn't work. And I don't know anybody else who still has a copy of this game, who has an Xbox 360 and is willing to play. So, me and my brother played it, and the Xbox almost took off and killed itself. So there's that. But that's the multiplayer. So overall thoughts. We're finally wrapping it up now. We're getting to the end. Overall thoughts of the game. As I said, when it works, it's fun. When it works, it's okay. Otherwise, it's just a funny mess. It's a complete mess, but it's funny. And obviously, this is meant to be a serious game. It's not meant to be funny, but it is. It's just a funny mess, and I like playing. Like I said, I don't mind playing broken games as long as it doesn't break my console. Then by all means, I don't mind playing a janky broken game. As long as I can still play it. It doesn't stop me from playing it, and it doesn't break the console. That's completely fine. So when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it's hilarious. But to be honest, I would still, even though this game didn't do very well, I don't want a sequel to this game, right? I just want to be clear about that. I don't want a sequel to this game, but I would like a next gen Aliens Colonial Marines. I would like them to try it again, but this time with a better studio, and just more. I want Alien Isolation type game, but with Colonial Marines. I want the claustrophobia. Yes, I have a gun, but that doesn't mean that I am the victor. Just because I've got a gun doesn't make me, straight away powerful. Like when you played, I never completed Alien Isolation, but I played it a bit. And one thing with Alien Isolation is the fact of you didn't get a gun, but you had ways to defend yourself. You had ways of, if the alien got too close, you could basically, you get a flamethrower and set it on fire. The problem is though, if you use that too much, then the alien would learn, and that you could set it on fire again later on in the game, and it wouldn't work. The alien would have learned, and that move doesn't work anymore. And that's what I want if I had a Colonial Marine sequel, is the fact of, yes, I've got a gun, but if I use it in certain ways, the alien will eventually learn of don't charge on head on. We might come from him from the ceiling now, or we might come from behind him. So that leaves me to constantly be in the fact of, this could be it feels real at that stage. Like I'm constantly have to be watching my motion tracker, using my motion tracker constantly, being I've got to make sure I know where it is at all times, because it could appear from anywhere. I want that claustrophobia. I want to feel like, even though I'm a Marine and I've got grenades and a pistol, and a pulse rifle, that any moment I could die. I just want that. I want Alien Isolation, but with Colonial Marines. Will we ever get that? I don't know. I generally thought of this year's game festival that we was going to. I've played Aliens Fireteam Elite. I quite enjoyed that, but it's not really what I was looking for. Also, the next game, the sort of twin stick shooter that was released at the Summer Games Fest quite recently. The game that I can't remember what it was called now. Did I write it down? Have I got it written down? Aliens Dark Descent, coming next year. That was it. That game looks interesting, but against a twin stick shooter. I want a first person shooter, Alien Isolation type game, kind of like Dead Space, but with the Aliens sort of franchise. I want to feel terrified. Yeah, I want to be equipped, but I also want to be sort of, I want to be like I want to be like a raw, exposed nerve. Like, yes, I've got body armor, but body armor means nothing. Like I'm still a weakling. That's what I want. Will we ever get it? I don't know. But that's my hope in it. And as of now, the closest I've gotten to that experience recently is this game. And knowing that fact kind of makes me wish that this game has succeeded, because granted, even though the story wasn't that good and the gameplay was janky, that if the game had worked, I feel like the game would have been a lot more enjoyable and probably would have done a lot better. And we probably would have potentially got a sequel, and that would have led to the fact of it having a reboot now, or the fact of having a lot more sort of first person shooters from Sega for the Alien Colonial Marines sort of franchise. But that being said, in hindsight, we know the history of this game, that it was a dumpster fire, that it went down, and it's completely dogged on it. But my overall thoughts is, like I said, when it works, but when it doesn't, it's a mess. Is it a game I would recommend people to go out and play? If you can find a copy cheap at like a charity shop or online or at a car boot, and when I say cheap, I mean like under £4. Like, don't pay any more than £4. You know, make sure like it's cheap. Then by all means, if you can find it at that, then get it and give it a go and just have a laugh. It is silly, but like I said, when it works, it works. Otherwise, but don't pay any more than a fiver. So could I recommend it? If you can find it cheap, yes. Otherwise, no. It's not a game that you really want to play. Like, you'll forget about it. More than likely, if I didn't have to do this podcast, if I didn't have to do an episode, well, I don't have to do an episode on it. But if I didn't want to do an episode on it, should I say, then I would have forgot about it really easily. Like, this is a game that you play, you have a laugh, you forget about it, you move on. It's not a game you remember. So it's one of those where it's factor. Play it if you want to experience it. Otherwise, don't bother. If I had to give it a rating out of 10, I would give it a 6. And it's lucky it's getting a 6 because I enjoy jank. I enjoy the comedy that came from the jank. That's why I'm giving extra points. But if I'm being completely critical, I would give it a 4. If I'm being completely critical, I'd give it a 4. But me being me, and I like to see the bright side and the upside of everything, and I don't like to be as completely negative. I will give it a 6, mainly because I thought the jank was funny. But again, that's just what I think. What do you think? Let me know what you think. Let me know on Twitter, Nerdstalgic_pod. If you agree, if you disagree, if you think like, Luke, you're being too nice, this game is a dumpster fire. Stop defending it. If that's what you feel, then fair enough. Or if you completely agree and you played it and you thought, again, the same as me, like it's when it works, otherwise, it's not great, then fantastic. Again, let me know on Twitter. But that's it. That's all she wrote. That's all she said about Aliens Colonial Marines. And time to wrap it up at the end, shall we? All right, let's get to the end. So that is all she wrote. We are finally at the end. So as I said, as I mentioned prior, let me know what you think. If you agree or disagree with me. Aliens Colonial Marines, it's not a bad game. It could have been better, but yeah, it's all right. It's one of those. But if you agree or disagree, by all means, let me know by following me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. You can find this podcast and all other episodes that I've done in the past on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and you can also find me on YouTube now. Just type in the Nerdstalgic podcast and look for my flaming face. Don't forget to subscribe, like a few of the older episodes, older videos, and don't forget to ring that bell because that's important, so you get notifications every time that I upload a video there. And yeah. Oh, most importantly, very, very most importantly, if you listen to this on Spotify, underneath my name, there is a little star. If you click on that star, if you haven't done so already, you can rate the podcast from 1 star to 5 star. 5 star being the best thing you ever heard in your life, to 1 star being this is the most terrible thing I've ever heard in my life. This is like Vogons doing poetry. Then by all means, whenever you feel like it's fair, from 1 to 5, it really, really helps because the way Spotify works is that the higher you star rating, the higher you go up on the podcasting ladder, and the more people will see you and your content. And the more people see it, the more I grow, and the more stuff we can do here, and the more fun we can have, and the more sort of nerdy and nostalgic and nostalgic and all that I can get. So by all means, if you feel like you're being generous, give me a star rating wherever you feel like it's fair, and that's about it. So thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this topic myself. Hopefully, if Kung Fu Panda went really, really well, and this one does well also, that I can look into doing more of these movie tie-in games in the future. I really enjoy them. Like as I said, these games are basically my childhood. These are the games that I grew up on. So I want to do more of these. I really enjoy them. So again, let me know if you agree or disagree, or even if you like the topic and you like this sort of thing that I'm doing here. Then just let me know on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. So yeah, so thank you for listening to this episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke, and as always, I'll get you in the next one. So see you later, guys. Bye bye.